Hello, welcome to another edition of Beyond the Box Score, another late night episode. I'm Trayvon Hastings, with me, Joey Korzanowski. We are now recording this at about 9:30 p.m., a couple hours after the college football playoff rankings, the second one for that committee and what they decided to put out. And overall, I think we both can agree there wasn't a ton of change. There was maybe a few teams that moved up a couple spots, a few new teams that jumped into the rankings, South Florida and Cincinnati. But other than that, pretty cut and dry here. I think the committee is sticking to what is considered their bread and butter. And the only thing that I think is warranted to maybe discuss is Texas Tech being above Georgia. But I'm not really going to hate the move. I mean, Georgia plays Texas this week. But other than that, I think it was a pretty simple college football playoff ranking that we got today.
Yeah, really no big changes, at least up at the top. I mean, really the big drop was BYU and that loss. I wonder if they would have maybe played a little better, like if they would have lost, say, maybe by a touchdown. Like if it would have been a closer game, not necessarily just a blowout, I wonder how far they would have dropped. As opposed to five. I mean, they dropped 5 spots now, down behind Oklahoma. So with Notre Dame ahead of you, I mean, you're kind of on the outside looking in, but. Um, Louisville, Virginia, kind of big droppers towards the bottom. Iowa only dropped by one. I found that kind of interesting. So really giving them a lot of respect. Oregon as well. Um, I mean, you could have made a case for A&M to jump Indiana or Ohio State. I don't think either of us were really willing to entertain that. I mean, it's kind of hard to credit or discredit any team at the top for losing. But I think really the big thing that we were talking about earlier, South Florida being ranked first group of five team to be ranked. Obviously, last week Memphis wasn't ranked, and I was kind of surprised. Now Memphis goes down, and USF slides in. And we were talking earlier. I think it really just kind of comes down to those ranked wins in the beginning of the year. Those still hold some weight here for USF.
They do. I do think, obviously, we were talking about this. There's a very good possibility that USF could miss the American Conference Championship game. There's some variables that need to happen. There are a ton of one-loss teams in that conference right now, and they get to play one of those one-loss teams this week in Navy, who is technically at the top of the conference. They have not had a signature win. They had a chance to get one against North Texas, and they lost 31-17. But again, with the way Navy plays that style of football, they're going to likely be in the game. And for USF, the other game for them that I think they would like to have back was the Memphis game. They lost that game. There were some questions for Memphis on who was going to be playing at quarterback because Lewis was hurt. He ended up playing, I believe, in that game anyway. And Memphis came out as surprise victors in a lot of ways against USF. So they could be even higher in these rankings if they didn't lose that game, obviously. If you're Memphis, I think you're kind of questioning some things because you beat them head to head and you're not ranked. They are. However, USF has a pretty solid resume for a G5 team, one that we don't typically get. And I think the only other team that could potentially warrant that G5 spot, assuming they're a conference champion at the end of the year, is James Madison. They have been very dominant. Of course, they play in the Sun Belt, but I don't think their season would look much different if they're playing in the American. They're obviously the clear best team in the Sun Belt, and I think they arguably are the best G5. So they would probably perform similarly in the American, but not really a whole lot that happened in terms of the rankings. We do have some big games this week, though. I would like to preview. Obviously, we've got Georgia and Texas. Notre Dame is going to have what we kind of agree will be a tricky game at Pitt. We have the USF game against Navy, and then there's a couple other ranked games. Iowa, they're going to play USC now. They're going to go to USC after being home against Oregon. And in my opinion, in a lot of ways, missing a lot of opportunities to solidify themselves and win that game against Oregon. They honestly controlled most of the game, but Oregon was able to sustain a few late drives, put up some points. There was a safety that happened very early in the game that I think Iowa wished did not happen because they lose this game by 2 points, and that safety comes back to bite the Hawkeyes. So I still think there's some probability for Iowa to get into the playoff. They would have to beat USC and win out, beat Nebraska as well. But I think there's a lot of Big Ten teams that are positioned to sneak in to the back half of the playoff if they win out. USC, if they win out. Iowa, if they win out. Michigan, obviously, if they beat Ohio State and they win out, there's a probability they also would go to the Big Ten championship game then because they have head to head on Ohio State. They wouldn't have it on USC, but if USC loses to Oregon and then the two other one-loss teams, you have Ohio State, Oregon, and Michigan, it would come down to some sort of tiebreak between the schools, and Michigan has head to head on Ohio State. So there's a lot of there's a lot of probabilities or possibilities that could happen still. Obviously, we think it'll be Ohio State and Indiana, but there's still a lot of football to play, and some of these teams that are slated between 14 and 20 could honestly be in there at the end of at the end of this.
Yeah, I think we could definitely see a lot of shakeup kind of here at the bottom. I mean, you were going through the top matchups. Pittsburgh, Notre Dame as well. Honestly, I can give you a little bit of a preview. That's kind of my top upset of the week. I know we'll get into a little bit of that, but yeah, I mean, in terms of the Big Ten itself, I find it hard that Ohio State and Indiana are really going to fall from that 1-2 spot. So uh, for USC, I mean, they have to beat Oregon, obviously. Oregon is going to be in that position to kind of defend their spot. USC is coming for it. And Michigan, I mean, it really just comes down to beating Ohio State because, I mean, if they were somehow able to do that, I think that win would obviously have the most kind of weight possible. I don't know how you would actually leave Michigan out, right? Like they just beat the number one team in the country. And they're on the end. They're just barely on the outside now. How do you not kind of give them that nod because they'd be in the Big Ten championship? I don't know how you don't give them that nod, but yeah, I think it'd be interesting. I think that honestly, if I had to pick, I think USC makes the playoffs. I do think that they beat Oregon. I like this USC team. Oregon's played in some tough games these past couple of weeks. That Wisconsin game, it was in the rain. This game against Iowa, cross country trip, it was in the rain as well. So I actually kind of want to get your thoughts on Oregon. Where do you kind of stand with them? Like, do you think that they're going to handle business with USC and really defend their spot? And then even when they get into the playoffs, do you think they'd have a chance?
I think they're definitely a top 12 team, despite the lack of signature wins or performances. Obviously, that Penn State game doesn't really carry as much weight anymore. However, they
See, I,
played
I, I would
great.
I would disagree with you on that. I think the Penn State game, I think it does hold weight just because of where Penn State was at the time
That's what I
when
was
they
getting ready
beat
to say,
them. Yeah, you know
despite
what I mean. So like,
that.
it's that game was tough. I think that was we talked about it when the game happened. That was Penn State. They had that game circled, so I think that was honestly one of the more impressive wins for Oregon. And honestly, I think the committee still kind of values that.
I do think they value it to some extent, maybe not as much as they used to. I wish the committee would factor in all these wins at the time at which the two teams played, because obviously for a team like Oregon, they beat Iowa, they're ranked. Let's say Iowa drops unranked. Is that still going to count as a ranked win for Oregon, or is it not going to? And a lot of times they take it off of the ranked win board. So I think it should matter a little bit more in terms of when you're playing these teams, like where are they at, right? So I think for Notre Dame, that 1 point loss to A&M is probably carrying a ton of weight because they played them, even though it was week one, they played them. A&M's been clearly dominant. They've been the
Mm-hmm.
best team in the SEC, and that's part of why Notre Dame is 9, despite, in my opinion, them not warranting being in the top 12 because of their schedule, how easy it's been, and the fact that Notre Dame, with all due respect, sure they have a higher strength of schedule than most of the playoff teams right now. They have to get up for 3 games, and they lost 2 of them. So I don't really think it makes sense to put them at 9. And to add on to that point, one of those teams they lost to, Miami, is ranked very much behind Notre Dame in the rankings. I'm not saying Miami should be 9. What I am saying is neither team should be ranked, and they should do the Texas Oklahoma model, which is Texas beat Oklahoma. They're right above them in the rankings. Notre Dame lost to Miami. Miami should be right above Notre Dame in the rankings. Put them 13 and 14. It doesn't affect me, but like I just think there's a few tweaks they could clean up because right now that means Notre Dame would be in the playoff, and I just don't know if they've earned their right to be in the playoff just because it's Notre Dame and that's their brand. I don't really agree with that at all. But we kind of agree. I I like where Pitt is right now as a team. I like how they're trending. They have a very good offense. They have a lot of skill players, and they've got a pretty consistent coach in Pat Narduzzi. He's got a certain style that I think could help tailor to this game against Notre Dame, and the physicality and being at Michigan State in the past, having played Notre Dame a bunch. He doesn't like Notre Dame. I think Pitt comes into this game at home motivated. They're 12.5 point underdogs. I think they can comfortably cover that as well. And for Notre Dame, this is by far their toughest game since they played USC just a few weeks ago. And even then, I think you could argue this is an even tougher game because they're on the road for this one. They weren't against USC, so there's not a ton of really enticing games. Louisville does host Clemson, and I know Clemson's had a pretty rocky year, but they're fighting for bowl eligibility right now, and Louisville's only a 2.5 point favorite. I think Clemson could pull it off. I'm not saying they're going to. Oregon's going to host Minnesota, so even though that's a cross country trip, Minnesota's got a very good defense. They can keep this game close as well. Michigan's got to go to Wrigley Field and play Northwestern. Late season games at Northwestern are tricky. They always have been. So Michigan could potentially stumble here, maybe squeak out with a win. But other than that, I mean, the only other ranked game that has piqued my interest is this Oklahoma at Alabama game. And obviously, Alabama's already had a very tough schedule as it is. For Oklahoma, this is pretty much going to be the game that determines if they're in the playoff or not. They're right on the outside looking in. They're at 11, but because of the playoff rules and how the rankings work, they get bumped out by the ACC champion or the G5 champion. So I think for Oklahoma, this game is a must. If they win this game, they play Missouri and LSU to end the season. And I think, despite Missouri being unranked, they are a good team. I don't think they should be ranked, but I do think they are a good team. And LSU obviously has talent. They haven't looked good all year. But if Oklahoma could beat Alabama this week, I think they too could solidify themselves in the playoff.
So say Oklahoma does beat Bama. How far would you drop Bama then? Currently at 3. Say Georgia wins. Georgia beats Texas. I mean, we could get really crazy. What if Texas and Oklahoma both win? I don't think that'll happen. But let's start with Oklahoma. Say Alabama loses. You'd have to drop them below Texas Tech. Would you drop? I mean, I don't know if you could drop them below Ole Miss.
I was just getting ready to say I'd probably only drop them below Texas Tech. So I would drop them 2 spots. If we're going under the Georgia wins scenario, if Georgia were to lose, obviously Texas Tech's going to move up to 4, and then that may be a different conversation. But I think there's a chance Alabama could lose the game as long as it's, say 1 point, 1 score, whatever it is, and they only drop 1 or 2 spots. I think it's warranted to put them behind Texas Tech, but I think on paper I would still take Alabama over Ole Miss, especially with the resume that
Yeah,
Alabama play. So they probably wouldn't even drop much. Now Georgia, on the other hand, um,
I think
they've
they would drop. I think they would drop.
they've had a couple scary games. There's been some games that haven't really looked particularly good in either. And if they were to lose to Texas, there's a possibility Georgia would be on the back half of the playoff, meaning they would be seeds 9 through whatever. They would have to go on the road in the first round. But under that scenario, say Georgia loses, Bama loses. Let's say Georgia falls below Ole Miss and they fall below Oregon. Let's say Oregon wins this week. Then Texas probably jumps Georgia naturally because they just beat them, which means Texas would be team 8 and Georgia would be team 9, more than likely. And then you have to factor in if Oklahoma wins, where would they be in there as well? Do they go above Georgia? So there's a chance Georgia would be 10, 11, or 12. I do think that's a possibility, but I for sure think Alabama probably wins this game. I think it'll be close, but that would definitely put a wrench in Ole Miss, or not Ole Miss, Oklahoma's college football playoff aspirations. As for Georgia and Texas, I know Texas has the 2 losses. They have been playing better though, and I do think this will be a close game because of the way these two teams have played all year. And if Texas is able to win this game, not only does it boost their chances, I think it just re-solidifies Ohio State as the top team because of that win. And I think they would be in the jackpot, frankly. I mean, Texas still only has one loss in conference play, and whoever wins this Texas Georgia game more than likely is eliminated from the SEC championship game. A&M is 6-0, Alabama 6-0, Georgia 6-1, Ole Miss is 5-1, and Texas is 4-1. So to be honest, I mean, if we get crazy, like you mentioned, say Bama loses, they have one loss. Georgia loses, they have two losses. Let's say they're out of it. That leaves you with A&M at 6-0, and then you would have a 6-1 Alabama, you would have a 5-1 Ole Miss, and you would have a 5-1 Texas to determine who that other team would be. And Texas would be playing Texas A&M then the season as well. So that's a whole nother factor in this. So the SEC could get pretty crazy. We said the same thing about the Big Ten. If Michigan beats Ohio State, I mean, they would have head to head. There's a chance they go to the Big Ten championship game. But yeah, I think most of these teams that are in the top 12 right now probably will be the representatives when we get to that point in the year. The only teams I think that are probably out of it are Oregon if they lose to USC. I know Miami's in there right now. I'm still suspect on them. Nor do I think they win the ACC championship game. I don't. I think Georgia Tech would beat them. They've beat them the last few years as well, and
Mm-hmm.
I think the only other teams in there that would potentially miss out are Texas. Really, I think if Notre Dame loses this game, they're done for. But I think what the committee has right now will more than likely be the end of season reveal as well.
Yeah, I think we're kind of pretty close with the same. I would say same like it's gonna be the same group of teams. I think the order is what is probably going to change. But I mean, like Texas though, if they win this week at Georgia, I mean they would move up in there, and then they'd play A&M to end the year after they play Arkansas. So like if some of these bottom teams win, it's really just going to get more and more bunched up. Because say it goes straight chalk, say Bama wins, Georgia wins, that essentially knocks out Oklahoma uh, and Texas. So I assume BYU would move back up a little bit. Utah could move back up. Georgia Tech, if they get a win, honestly, say Notre Dame loses because I really do think Pitt has a really good chance to win this game. How far does Pitt move up? Does Pitt jump some of these groups of Big Ten teams, right? Iowa, Louisville, Virginia, Michigan, because Pitt would then have two ranked wins. They did beat Florida State when they were ranked. So, and you see the committee clearly values Notre Dame, having them this high with two losses. So there are definitely a lot of chaos scenarios here, and I really do think some of them are likely. I will say, I think Pitt beating Notre Dame is much more likely than Texas winning at Georgia or Oklahoma winning at Bama. I think Georgia and Bama are favorited and for good reason, but I think I would have to pick Notre Dame as kind of my top upset for the week, or at least the most likely.
Um, I think in terms of most likely, um, it's tough to say. Looking at Georgia's schedule, and I have it here in front of me on my computer, but the 3-point win against Tennessee, you could argue they probably should have lost that game. With the way Tennessee got out guns blazing, they lose to Bama the next week. They they handle Kentucky. I'm not going to say they dominated them, but they handled them. They squeaked out of the Auburn game with a win. They squeaked out of the Florida game 2 weeks ago with a win. They also probably squeaked out of an Ole Miss win as well. That's a game I think they should have won. So I think Georgia's season has been pretty questionable. I think this could honestly be their first true real test outside of the Alabama game, and we'll see from there. I mean, Ole Miss is a true test, but at the same time, that was Ole Miss's biggest game by far. They had not really played anybody up to that point, and I think this is a Texas team that has rebounded from the bad start to the year, and they've made amends meet with their team, how they want to play. Arch has looked better the last few weeks as well, and I'm saying all this despite Texas having a few scary games here. OT against Kentucky, OT against Mississippi State, and then they let Vanderbilt get all the way back into the game, and they still win pretty comfortably 34-31. But the last 3 weeks have not been the greatest for Texas either. So this game is going to be, it's hard to in my opinion, get a read on the Texas Georgia game. As for Alabama, Oklahoma, Alabama's played by far the toughest schedule in the country. I'm not really going to argue with anybody on that. I think we can agree. In terms of what Bama has played, they probably have the toughest schedule. And despite that, they only have they only have the one loss. So they made it out of the schedule. The one loss, ironically, to a now unranked Florida State team. But they beat Georgia, they beat Vandy, they beat Mizzou, they beat Tennessee, all those ranked games back to back to back to back. And then they had to play a tricky one at South Carolina, and they're able to get a win there. And then they pretty much dominate LSU, holding them to 9 points. I know it's only 20-9, but they didn't really have to do much to beat LSU in that game. So I think Alabama wins this game. I think they could win it, and they're not going to move at all in the rankings. I think there would be a discussion about it, but I really like where A&M and Alabama is at, in addition to Ohio State and Indiana. I still have questions about A&M, and those will probably get answered when they play Texas. But I think that top four is probably going to be the top four for most of, if not all, the year. And then we'll see what happens in that Big Ten championship game and that SEC championship game.
Yeah, I think I would have to agree. I think that would really be our first movement in the top four. Which, honestly, though, I mean, that really could just create for some more chaos, like we said, throughout um, some of these bottom rankings. Obviously, I think USF would have to be the favorite to get in, considering if they went out, that they would be in. So it should shape up for a good college football playoff, and hopefully for some more interesting first round games compared to last year. I feel like we got a bunch of blowouts with Penn State over SMU. All those games were just really uncompetitive for the most part, which is kind of disappointing. I was happy that we had a college football playoff, kind of this tournament style. I think it's great, honestly. I really do. But hopefully we can get some more interesting first round matchups.
I agree. And what I will say now, since we're going to transition it, but I think we'll get some very good playoff matchups in the NFL. It's been a very wide open year, I would argue. Obviously, we know who the consistent contending teams are: the Eagles, the Rams, the Chiefs, but there have been a lot of new emerging teams this year that have really surprised people. I'm not surprised New England is 8-2. I'm kind of surprised in terms of how it's looked, but I figured they would start out 6-2 with the schedule they had the first 8 games. There was no way they were going to lose more than 2 games. That held true. I think they arguably should be 9-1. They probably blew that Steelers game. So this is a Patriots team that has earned their stake. And right now, I mean, I really like their chances to win the division. I know Buffalo is still there and looming, but Buffalo's had some rocky games, and they just got smacked by the Dolphins, which does not happen for them. So I really like New England. I do like the Colts. I'm very low on the 8-2 Denver Broncos. There's a lot of reasons for it that are warranted, but I think we have the teams that we know will compete: the Lions, the Eagles, the Buccaneers, the Rams, the Chiefs, but and the Bills. But other than that, we've had a lot of new exciting teams kind of emerge this year and make themselves known to the NFL world, especially the Colts and Patriots.
Yeah, I think it's good to see, and even like I still kind of consider the Lions one of those new teams, right? Because they made the NFC Championship, that was 2 years ago, and then last year they kind of flamed out. So it feels like they've just continued to get better. So I know they've won the division, and I mean, I guess they really aren't technically a new team, but they're really a team who hasn't won in the playoffs before. So it still feels like they're still kind of hungry and out for blood. Obviously, the Packers. I mean, that's really the big kind of talking point now because. I think the thing with the Packers, well, now that they're third in the NFC North, great teams might struggle with bad teams and kind of squeak away victories, right? Like uh I guess like the Broncos in the Giants would be kind of an interesting example, right? Yeah, the Broncos kind of fumbled that game away, but they found a way to win. The Packers are just downright losing these games, right? They really blew that game against the Browns. It was really a defensive battle, but they had a double-digit lead in the fourth quarter. They definitely should have won that game. And then that game against the Panthers, I mean, they never really had any life, but just the Panthers have been one of the worst road teams in the league the past couple of years. Good teams, you just simply don't lose those games. They find ways to win those games, and the fact that they didn't win those games, and then last night another close game. I know it's the Eagles now, so a huge step up in class from some past competition. But still, if you really want to be the Super Bowl contender, you have to find a way to win some of these one score games, right? Even Dallas, right? It was a one score game. They ended up tying. They couldn't even get the win. So I think the Packers have the most question marks. Now I will say, to their credit, they're not very healthy right now. Tucker Kraft's going to be out the season. That's a huge blow. I'm not going to lie. Last night, you could really tell that their offense was missing Tucker Kraft, but they're going to need some of these receivers to step up if they really want to have a chance here.
I think the Packers are interesting. They have two of the better wins in the league, but they also have two of the worst losses in the league, and it's really not two anymore. Shout out the Panthers; they're quietly just hovering right on the outside of the playoff picture. They are 5-5 now. They've been very good at home, and they're making it interesting. But for Green Bay, I mean, they opened the year, they beat the Lions, and then they beat the Commanders, who we didn't know what their season was going to look like. I expected regression, but they've regressed even more than I expected. And then they come out and they lose to Cleveland. They tie Dallas. They beat the Bengals. Doesn't really mean anything. Joe Burrow wasn't playing, and that was the first week of the Joe Flacco experiment in
He
Cincinnati.
was there for he was there for like 3 days, not even a week.
Yeah, they squeak out a win against the Cardinals. They handle the Steelers, which I think was a good kind of get right
hmm
game for them. But then they
on the road too, yeah.
yeah, and then they turn around and lose these next two games to Carolina and Philadelphia, both by 3 points. And the way the Carolina game felt, or how it was played, it definitely just translated into the Eagles game because they had no sort of offense whatsoever. Obviously, the Tucker Kraft injury hurts, but they have to rebound because they play at the Giants this upcoming week, who have had a sustainable offense with Jackson Dart back there. They have a good defense. It could be a tricky game for Green Bay, but after that, it's NFC North galore because they play Minnesota, Detroit, Chicago back to back to back, Denver, who will get a look at their team as well. Not really high on the Broncos right now for many reasons. And then Chicago, Baltimore, Minnesota. I mean, that's basically all teams that are still trying to get in the playoffs. They play all those teams in a row, except for the Giants, who could easily be 6-3 right now if they don't blow four different road games that they led by 10 or more in. The Giants could be a playoff team as well. So the Packers are, in my opinion, not worthy of a conversation right now, just because, especially after that game last night, and as an Eagles fan, while I was frustrated, I was very pleased to see how the defense performed. Getting you can already see the effect Jalen Phillips has had on that pass rushing unit for the Eagles, and getting Jalen Carter back in the lineup. When Jalen Hurts and Jalen Carter both play in the last two seasons, the Eagles are 17-1. They're damn near unbeatable when both of those guys are in the lineup. So that the Eagles are going to be what they are. The last 4 years, the Eagles are 8-1, 8-1, 7-2, and 7-2 through 9 games. They just have earned a model of consistency that really doesn't happen much in the league. I mean, the Eagles have the best strength of victory in the league as well. There's only two teams with strength of victories above 500. Um, Strength of victory, for those who may not understand, the strength of the wins that you have, so the record of those teams. The Eagles, it's at 51-6 right now. The Steelers are next, and theirs is 51-1. Nobody else in the league has a strength of victory above 500. The Eagles also have a strength of schedule above 500. So they're 7-2 against arguably the toughest schedule in the entire league, while having a bottom like 7 offense and a bottom 7 defense. So in terms of total yardage and total yardage for both offense and defense. So the Eagles, weirdly, have performed like a rather pedestrian team all year, but they know how to win close games. They've got that championship mentality, and right now they would be the 1 seed in the NFC playoffs. And the team that would be right behind them, who I think is the best team in the entire NFL when we do our power rankings here in a second, is the Seahawks. They have the best defense in the league right now. They've been the most consistent defense, at least, and they have a what feels like unstoppable duo of Sam Darnold and Jackson Smith and Jake Butt.
Yeah, and this is all with Cooper Kupp banged up too, right? So I mean, they're not even really fully healthy yet. Yeah, I really like the Seahawks team. They're really good on the road. They've got a good defensive unit. It's not just a couple of good players; it's a good defensive unit. And Sam Darnold has been worth every penny so far. Honestly, uh, I had kind of thought that the Seahawks shelled out a lot of money. They were taking a pretty big gamble on Darnold. Yeah, Darnold had played really good last year with the Vikings, and he certainly earned it. But, all right, yeah, that was 1 year, and now you want to see Sam Darnold replicate that. And honestly, I think we all kind of underestimated how good of a fit this was. I mean, you put Jackson Smith and Jigba, his growth and development has been phenomenal. He is a true wide receiver one. But this team is built to win in the playoffs, right? I mean, how many defenses are going to be able to stop this passing attack? Especially when Cooper Kupp healthy. Not very many, in my opinion. So I think this team is going to be good. It kind of sucks that they play in probably the toughest division right now in the NFC West. You got the Rams and the Niners are right behind them. I mean, the NFC West very well could get three teams in. Right now, the Niners are a half game back behind the Packers. So if the Packers would have lost that game to Dallas, the Packers would currently be in the playoffs. So I think it is interesting. But to your point about the Eagles and their schedule, it only gets tougher. I mean, they got to play the Lions this week. Uh, they do get it at home. I think this is really going to be a really good matchup because the Lions, I feel like, are kind of, I don't want to say in their peak form, but they've been playing some really good football as of late. Yeah, they had that loss to the Vikings, but uh, outside of that, I think they will get up for this one. It's obviously going to be the matchup of the week. But yeah, I think you mentioned power rankings. I'm hesitant to put the Eagles back up at the top, but I was really high on them coming into the year. I really thought it was them and the Ravens were really kind of my two favorites to come out of each conference. So, but really, you think about it, the Eagles, there are two losses. That made that Broncos loss. I mean, they just kind of got outplayed in the second half. I mean, Sean Payton, they scored, and then Sean Payton he elects to go for two, and they get it. I mean, just really gutsy coaching, and it paid off. And then that loss to the Giants, divisional opponent, short week on the road. You didn't have a lot of film on Jackson Dart, didn't really know how to prepare, and whatnot. So the losses, you can't really put too much stock into them, especially that Giants loss. I think that is what it is. So they really have one loss that you can really kind of put a ton of stock into. But then, like you said, the wins have been impressive. The Chiefs, the Buccaneers, the Bucks look like they're going to win their division. Green Bay, the Vikings. I mean, that is a pretty tough schedule. And then if they cap it off with a win against the Lions this week, I think that'd have to be a top power rankings, right?
And they beat the Rams in a big comeback when
Yeah,
they decided to throw the
yeah.
football. So yes, they played a tough one against Minnesota, and I know Carson Wentz was playing, but I argue Carson Wentz right now gives the Vikings a better chance to win than J.J. McCarthy does. That's just, frankly, my
Hmm.
opinion. I'm not going to change it. Carson Wentz,
He did play good against the Lions though. He did look good against the Lions.
he looked good for 143 yards. I mean, it is what it is.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
two wins.
He ran in a touchdown though. I didn't think I'd ever be defending JJ McCarthy, but he looked good against the Lions. I don't know. He's shown some flashes, but you definitely need to see more. I think the injury hurt him.
I just think, in terms of Minnesota and what is on their football team, they need a guy who is a little bit more capable of actually distributing the ball to the weapons there. And I think Carson
Hmm.
Wentz does. I don't think J.J. McCarthy does. At least not right now. He maybe opens up the run game more than Carson Wentz would. However, for the passing aspect, I just think Carson Wentz is better right now. And unfortunately, he's
Hmm.
out for the year. So, because Kevin O'Connell left him out for dead and he destroyed his shoulder. So, he's done for. It'll be curious to see if the Vikings get a more solidified backup behind McCarthy, but they're a team on the outside looking in right now. The win against the Packers, it is what it is. It's 10-7, but at the end of the day, the Eagles made more plays when they needed to win. They turned over Green Bay twice in Philly territory when the Packers were threatening. They executed late with the big Saquon catch and run, and then next play they throw a Hurts to Smitty touchdown. So I mean,
Hmm.
they did what they needed to do to get out and ahead, get a lead, and then people are going to question the going for it at the end of the game thing with 27 seconds left. Um, the only other thing to do would have been taking a delay and punting. If they go for a field goal there and they miss, Green Bay gets the ball pretty much at midfield or at the spot of the missed kick, and they don't even have to really move the ball much to go get a field goal and tie the game. So, with all that in mind, I wasn't really against them going for it. I would have just preferred they punted. And the minute that Sirianni called timeout, they didn't take a delay. I knew they were going to go for it. It's not really that hard to figure out. They would have taken the delay the first time, went from there. But he had confidence in the defense and with the way the game was going. that they were going to get the job done, and they did. So this is a tough stretch for the Eagles. Since we're on that topic, Detroit at Dallas, they're going to play the Bears, who only have a strength of victory of about 27-2. Not good. Pretty much all the bad teams in the league have like a 200 to 300 win percentage in terms of strength of victory. So the Bears have beaten a lot of bad teams. That's all that really means. They've played a lot of teams with bad records. Maybe they aren't bad teams, but they do have bad records. And taking a look at Chicago, I mean, they beat the Commanders by one. Good win, and with the way it came out. But they beat the Saints. They beat the Bengals. Crazy comeback there as well. I mean, I think it is important to highlight they are winning these games that they wouldn't have last year. I mean, they even beat the Giants by 4. They've been in a lot of close games that they haven't been able to win like for years. So
Mm-hmm.
they got shelled by the Lions like they always do. They lost that first game to JJ McCarthy, which they probably would want back. They would be 7-2. They would be tied for first in the NFC, and that would be that. But they've beat a lot of teams that have been down. They decimated the Cowboys, which shocked me at the time. I thought the Cowboys would win
Mm-hmm.
that game, and the schedule definitely gets tougher for the Bears. Minnesota, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, Green Bay, Cleveland, Green Bay, San Francisco, and Detroit. So it is a much tougher end of the season schedule for the Bears, but we're gonna find out a lot about what their team is, where are they right now, Ben Johnson as well. So as for the Eagles, like to answer your question, if they win this game, they've definitely earned the right to still be number one in the power rankings. In my opinion, obviously you can make an argument for New England and the Colts, but their strength of schedule and strength of victory, the two of them each, are not nearly as good as the Eagles are, despite them being better teams on paper right now with how they've actually performed. Just to put it into perspective for people, I mean, the Eagles literally have like a bottom 10, 7 to 10 offense right now, bottom 7 to 10 defense right now. Yet they're still 7-2 against pretty much mostly contending teams. So I don't know what else to like say about it other than that. Like if the Eagles were
Mm-hmm.
playing at their, if they were playing good and they didn't have all these issues, they'd be undefeated, and it would have looked way better. They wouldn't have lost to Denver in a game they should have sealed away in the fourth quarter, up 2 scores. And the Giants loss, they probably squeak it out in a scary win, but they wouldn't lose the way that they did. So, um, yeah, I think the Eagles. I have them 4. If we're going to talk about our power rankings, I do have them 4. There are reasons for that.
I
Uh,
I think so. I think I'm gonna move them up in mine. I really want to put them at the top. I really feel like the more we've talked, I mean, I'm putting a lot of stock into the strength of victory. Like playing these good teams, I mean, obviously, it just builds you up and builds up that catalyst kind of, and it prepares you for the playoff atmosphere. So I I think the Eagles have a really good argument to be number one, especially over the Rams. Who they beat.
yeah, and the reason I don't have them 1 and I have the Seahawks 1 is just because I think they're the most complete team in the league right now. They don't have to play the Eagles. They do have to play the Rams this week, and I think again in another 2 or 3 weeks. So we'll get to see, what the Seahawks are about. We'll get to see what this looks like for the Rams. Obviously, Matt Stafford, probably in my opinion, should be the MVP frontrunner in terms of how he has performed. I know people are going to say Jonathan Taylor when they hear this, but Saquon Barkley had the greatest running back season ever last year, and he didn't even get I think he got maybe a couple MVP votes. He wasn't even in consideration for the award. Jonathan Taylor's not winning MVP. We need to get that straightened. I don't agree with that. I completely want that to change, but it's not going to happen. Jonathan Taylor has to run for 2,200 yards for that to happen, and if he doesn't even get to 2,000, no way, no shot he wins MVP. So I mean, it is what it is. Daniel Jones is also leading the league in passing, prior to last week.
Mhm.
So he too has a little bit of a claim to the whole. I'm part of the reason why we're so good because he's offered sustainability at the position. But for me, it's Seahawks for sure at 1. I got Patriots and Colts at 2 and 3. I just think the Pats look a little bit better right now, and they're doing all this without a run game. Frankly, Drake May has been a dark horse MVP contender. They've got a point differential of 73. The Colts have a point differential of 115, but these two teams are very much similar on paper. The Patriots are hitting it on all cylinders offensively right now as well. They just had a big win against Tampa Bay. I like where they're at. The Colts have started to, they've shown some slippage the last few weeks, and I do think there's a chance they could drop a few games here towards the end of the year, but I don't envision that happening. Then I have the Eagles at 4, and then I believe I went Rams at 5. Pretty much head to head there. Eagles pull out a win against the Rams in a game they should have lost to them, and that's that. And then I went Lions, Chargers, Bills, Chiefs, and Bucks. And the reason it's in that order, I think the Lions definitively would be that next best team in the NFC. And we'll get to see what happens here when they play the Eagles. Things might get shuffled. But after that, the Chargers beat the Bills and the Chiefs. So the Chargers, in my opinion, are or should be above both. And the Bills beat the Chiefs. And then obviously you have the Buccaneers in there. I think they played Kansas City. I don't remember. And Kansas City had won that game. So that's pretty simple. I know Kansas City is not even in the playoffs right now. They're the first team out in the AFC behind Jacksonville, but this is a team that likely will be in it when it's all said and done. They play Denver this week. I expect them to beat Denver despite them being better. However, it is a really strange part of the schedule. They play Denver, they play Indianapolis, they play Dallas. Then they have Houston, the Chargers again, the Titans, and Denver. So these next 3 games are very important for the Chiefs if they want to get into the playoffs and try to get back to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I two things here. So one thing I quickly want to point out: a lot of these teams that have some of these losses, I think you have to be careful when looking at these losses because they are divisional losses, and we know that divisional losses are much different than losing to a regular team. Like the Lions losing to the Vikings, like the Eagles losing to the Giants, even the Chiefs losing to the Chargers in Week 1. I mean, the Broncos almost lost to the Raiders this week, so it's tough when I mean even the Bills losing to the Patriots, right? So yeah, you might have beaten everybody else. So I think you have to kind of look at it holistically, because when you're focusing on losses, I just think those divisional games are just much tougher, simply. But yeah, it's funny you bring up the Chiefs because I feel like so them and the Ravens, everybody was high on coming into the year, right? And then they had a little bit of early season adversities, some injuries. Maybe the Ravens dealt with a little more, and it affected them a little more. But this Chiefs team, I mean, they look good. They beat the Lions at home. I mean, this offense is absolutely clicking. They lost to the Bills, but I mean, you have to give credit to the Bills there. The Bills outplayed them, but let's not act like that isn't the Bills' Super Bowl. The Bills always get up for Kansas City in the regular season every time they host them. I made the mistake. I honestly I thought the Chiefs would win. I know we both did. And honestly, if they played again, even if it's in Buffalo in the playoffs, I am probably taking the Chiefs. I'm going to be completely honest. There's just not many teams I'd bet against Pat Mahomes in the playoffs. But in terms of the Seahawks, yeah, I have them at 3, but you know definitely don't blame you for having them at number 1. But yeah, the Chiefs, I think, will be interesting because they're currently 3 games behind the Broncos for their division. They got to play the Broncos twice, which will be critical games, of course. But if the Chiefs, they don't really have much room for error anymore if they want to host a playoff game. They're kind of going to have to kind of kick it into gear now, because there is, the season's they're already about halfway through games right now, so the opportunities are running out for the Chiefs to make up this 3-game deficit.
They are running out. And not only do they play Denver twice, and we both think Denver definitely isn't a true 8-2 team. I think that record isn't really indicative of how they looked against the Eagles, how they looked against the Giants, despite both of those being wins, how they even looked against the Raiders last week. Could very easily be a 5-4 team. Obviously, they're not, and we give them credit for winning those games. But I think out
Mm-hmm.
of all of the 8-2 or 7-2, 6-3 teams, uh, Denver's definitely beneath most of those teams. I thought about putting them at 10 over Tampa Bay, but I just like what I've seen more from Tampa Bay, especially with all their injuries that they have amassed. They're still competitive. They're still in this thing. And they've beaten a few teams better or been in games with better teams than what the Broncos have played. They haven't really played a lot of good teams. So, with that in mind, Chiefs have Denver twice. I think they can definitely win both of those games, even if they split. They have the Colts. they have the Chargers still. They get lucky, you know. They get to play the Titans. That's a little bit of a freebie. I think they end the season with the Raiders as well, so probably another freebie. So you can pretty much give Kansas City 7 wins, but even the Dallas game and the Houston game, those aren't necessarily easy. Those are teams in the middle of the pack still fighting for the playoffs. Maybe won't be at that time, but Houston has a good defense. They've just been riddled with injuries all year and offensively, but they'll have hopefully full health at the time of that game. And then Dallas has the best offense in the league, and it'll be a battle of what typically would be strengths, which is the Kansas City defense against the Dallas offense. Now I think it's shifted. I think Kansas City's offense is the strength of their team right now, and that could be a very high scoring game, and that could play in the favor of the Cowboys. So we'll see, but I agree. Not a lot of margin for error left for Kansas City. I could very easily see them going 9-8. I could very easily see them going like 11-5. I think those are both, or 11-6. Those are both very much possibilities.
Yeah, and those are all going to be critical, coming down to this divisional race. I mean, obviously, it helps you play the Broncos twice because I'm pretty sure, is it the Raiders or is it the Broncos? It might be both, where the Chiefs have won like 11 or 12 straight games against them. I mean, they've just completely dominated some of these divisional matchups.
Yeah, pretty much anybody not named the Chargers, and even the Chargers to throw that in there, like they have dominated their divisional games in this entire era of Patrick Mahomes. Really, the Chargers have been the only team to be consistently in those games, as well as the Raiders when Derek Carr was around and Devontae Adams, and when the Raiders were still trying to win a ton of games, they were oftentimes in those games. The only team that has really struggled like that against the Chiefs has been Denver. And even last year, Denver had their chances. They obviously got their kick blocked. They lost a game to KC they probably shouldn't have. But that's the thing. KC hasn't been able to win these close games. They lost a close one to Buffalo. They lost a close one to the Eagles. They lost a close one to the Chargers. Lose another one to Jacksonville that's close. And Jacksonville's right above them because of head to head. So that game could come back to bite KC if we get into tiebreakers at the end of the year. Same thing with Buffalo, since they're not necessarily as likely to win their division against the Patriots and the Dolphins and the Jets. So they have 3 games specifically that they have a losing head-to-head battle against for the wild card. The Chargers, the Jags, and the Bills, who ironically are the 3 wild card teams right now. So the Chiefs pretty much have an extra game they have to make up because they can't have the same record. They would lose that head-to-head. So they have a lot of ground they got to pick up. 2 wins against Denver would be huge. Obviously, getting the split with the Chargers would kind of cancel that, and that would be huge as well. And then the Colts, because we don't know what's going to happen with the Colts. Maybe they fall off somehow. They have a very light schedule because of the division that they play in to end the season. I think they still have to play the Titans one more time. They might have already played them twice, but they beat Atlanta in a weird game this week. Like I said, they've kind of shown some slippage. The Steelers they lost to, but they have KC, and that's pretty much, other than Seattle, the top game for the Colts. I mean, they have Houston twice and Jacksonville twice, with Kansas City, Seattle, and San Francisco. So a lot of divisional games for the Colts as well. Very winnable ones, I would like to add. Even San Francisco, very winnable at this point. They could potentially only lose really 2 games to end the year, and then that's a 13-4 team and probably the 1 seed in the AFC. We'll see what happens with New England, but their schedule gets a little bit tougher here. I know New England has to play the Steelers. I think they have to play the Packers. I think they have to play the Ravens, and they would have to play the Bills one more time, I believe. So we'll see what truly New England is made up of. Same thing with the Colts, but overall, I think we know what the Colts are. They're just, despite knowing what they are, you cannot stop their run game. That's what makes them very tricky. So
Yeah, so let me ask you this: Is there a world where the Colts do kind of fall off here? I mean, this is the more I'm looking at this is kind of a tough schedule. So we talked about divisional losses. So let's say they split these with Houston and Jacksonville, because honestly, I do think at Houston to end the year, Houston might be checked out of it at that point if they're not in it. But that defense, I think, can keep them in it. I mean, if they can get some pressure on Daniel Jones, um, even Jacksonville, I mean, let's just assume they split those, right? So let's say they lose at Kansas City next week, and they lose at Seattle as well. So I mean that's four losses to end the year, and then hosting the Niners. The Niners travel well. That wouldn't necessarily be the easiest game. So I'm not trying to jump ship on the Colts or anything, but you mentioned strength of record. I mean, they don't really have a big time win. I mean, they at the Chargers, sure, big win. The Cardinals, say it was a good win. They played well that game, but I mean, this is a tough end to the schedule. Also, I don't think it's all that unrealistic. Say the Colts finish with say maybe seven losses.
I'm willing to say 11-6 for the
Yeah,
Colts.
I think seven's a bit harsh. But you know, I mean, I'm just saying things could snowball quickly, right? You lose to Kansas City, and say you lose to Houston just because tend to split. I mean, that's back-to-back losses right there. You might start feeling the heat. You got two road games coming up after that, so things can heat up real quick.
And we've kind of seen that snowball effect with the Steelers. It's a little bit different just because of where they're at as a team, where they've been as a team, frankly, because they continue to sit around this 500 ball. They just cannot find a way to avoid being about 500. They always find a way to be 9-8 or 10-7. It's never, oh, you know, we're a 12-win team, we're an 11-win team. No, it's always going to be 9 or 10 wins with the Steelers. So they took out a week one game against the Jets where honestly that was probably the best game the Jets have played all year to this point. I know the Cincinnati game was a Cincinnati game, but even then, that was the only game the Jets have been able to run and pass efficiently. And after that game, I was like, hey, maybe the Jets will actually, be a little competitive. And that's been the complete opposite. So they lose to Seattle. They went into Pittsburgh, dominated them. The win against New England is huge for Pittsburgh right now, as well as the close win against Minnesota. They handled the Browns, but we've seen a ripple effect of that Bengals loss because they lose that game to the Bengals. They then lose the next week to Green Bay. They get the win against the Colts, which was huge, but then they turn around this week against the Chargers and they fall back again, flat on their face, playing Cincinnati again this week, this time at home, before they play Chicago, Buffalo, Baltimore, and then Miami, Detroit, Cleveland, and Baltimore again. And somehow, some way, the Ravens. There's only been three teams in the history of the NFL to make the playoffs at I think it's 1-5, and the Ravens they've rattled off 3 wins in a row here. So they are trying to defeat the odds, defeat the betters, defeat my money as well in terms of the betting aspect. Because I did not think this team would actually find a way to rally and win the division or make the playoffs. And right now, they're pretty much a game out of both. So they have a chance. They play a ton of divisional games as well, which you've mentioned. Cleveland this week. They tend to struggle at Cleveland. The Browns have a good game plan. They have a good defense. And then they're going to play the Jets. But after that, it's Cincinnati with Joe Burrow possibly back. Pittsburgh, Joe Burrow being for sure back in the December 14th game against Cincinnati. And then New England, Green Bay, and Pittsburgh. So it's by no means an easy schedule for the Ravens. And that's why I don't think they're going to be able to make up this ground on Pittsburgh because I think their schedule could be tougher than Pittsburgh's, especially if Joe Burrow is back for both of those two games.
Yeah, I mean, if you look, I mean, like you mentioned the Ravens schedule, so I honestly I think this Browns game would be really telling. I think for both the health of Lamar. I mean, honestly, when you watch this run game with Derrick Henry, there's not as many explosive plays as there have been in the past. Now, I'm not going to come here and say Derrick Henry's washed by any means, but I don't think he might be losing some of that explosiveness a little bit. I mean, they still can consistently run the football. They did it pretty well against the Bears, but it it might be something to monitor here. But say, all right, say they beat the Browns. Honestly, I would think that would be impressive. A divisional road win, I do think that would be, especially if it's in convincing fashion, right? I think that'd be impressive. And the Jets, I mean, that would be 5 wins in a row right there, and they'd be sitting at 6-5. Uh, I would imagine they'd likely be atop the division, um, because the Steelers, I mean, are only a game ahead right now, and just kind of with the way that they're trending, it's certainly not looking good for the Steelers. Um, yeah, they'll have to play the Bengals and then at Chicago. You mentioned their schedule; it does get a bit tougher. So the path is there for the Ravens to host a playoff game. I don't think it is out of the realm of possibilities whatsoever.
Definitely not out of the realm of possibilities. And to kind of cap off the podcast, since we're going to shorten up the topics, really go in depth this week, what is your official power rankings? And then I'll list mine off one more time. But what would you officially do? I didn't know if you extended it out to 10, but if you did, what is that top 10? Like, what does it
All right, so I'll start at the top. I got the Eagles and the Rams at 1 and 2. I'm really high on the Rams. I think the Eagles, and I talked about it. Their two losses. I think don't want to say fluky, but I think they've definitely bounced back nicely. So I think that they've got the recipe to win. I think they're very tough to beat, especially come playoff time. And they're going to line up across me. They're going to punch you in the mouth. They're going to do it for 4 quarters, and then the Rams, you mentioned Matthew Stafford, potential MVP. So I've got the Seahawks at 3. I'm also very high on the Seahawks. I've got the Patriots at 4, the Colts at 5. I think those two teams are kind of interchangeable. The Lions at 6. The Lions are interesting to me because they have really good players, but Jared Goff is just he's been consistently good, but he likes to have these kind of stinker games. You saw it against Minnesota. He didn't have his best game. You saw the playoffs against the Commanders. You put a little pressure on him. But luckily for the Lions, you haven't really seen that a ton, especially against lower competition. So you saw they just absolutely belted Washington. But that's what they do. They really beat up on those bad teams. And so the Lions are kind of tough for me. I just need to see it against better teams. This week against Philly, in Philly, that's going to be a huge game. I think the Lions would immediately shoot up into the top 2 or 3 in my power rankings if they win at Philly. I think that'd be a huge statement win. So then I got the Bills at 7, the Chiefs at 8, the Chargers at 9, and then the Buccaneers at 10. Really nobody else to put at 10 besides the Broncos maybe. But I think we would both take the Buccaneers over the Broncos right now. I think they're the better team. I think you've got the better quarterback. You don't have the better defense though. Honestly, if that game, say Broncos Buccaneers in Denver, I would probably be inclined to pick Denver due to the defense and the elevation, of course. But I like Baker. I like what he's done. The Buccaneers there, the Chargers ahead of them. So it's funny we put a lot of stock into head-to-head competition, but I've got the Chiefs over the Chargers, and I think just because that Chargers game was week 1, neutral site, first game of the year. Now the Chargers have had some up and down games. They lost the Commanders at home, given the Commanders were healthy. Lost to the Colts at home. I mean, they've just had some games where they're almost like the Packers in a sense, right? Like they lost that Giants game, so they a little more up and down on the spectrum. I just trust the Chiefs a little bit more, so I've got the Chiefs at 8, but I do have the Bills ahead of them.
some similarities, a little bit of variance. I think we have the general kind of gist of like where these teams are. We basically just rearranged our top fives. Again, to restate mine, I have the Seahawks at 1. I think they've definitely earned that right. I think they've probably been equally surprising to the next 2 teams I have, New England and Indianapolis. Those are 1, 2, and 3. I think those are the 3 biggest kind of surprise stories in the league this year. And I think, at least for me, I expected all those teams to get better. I had a little bit more in terms of question marks on Seattle because of the fit with Sam Darnold, and it's actually been a beautiful fit. But other than that, I knew New England was going to be at least a 9-win team. I figured the Colts would probably have a little bit more sustainability. I didn't know for sure if Daniel Jones was going to win the starting job, but he did. And after he did, he's performed exceptionally well. And Anthony Richardson has probably seen the last of his days as an Indianapolis Colt. After that, I have the same order as you, Eagles and Rams. I just have them at 4 and 5. I think the Eagles' schedule has been better than the Rams' schedule. Obviously, it's the best one in the league. They have the same record. They have head-to-head on the Rams, and despite the Rams probably playing better, they did not beat the Eagles. Therefore, I think as a cool tiebreaker for this, we'll go with the Eagles. And then after that, I have the Lions. I agree with your point on them beating up on bad teams, but they do play well in games against good teams at the same time. They may not just win them at the same
Absolutely.
frequency. So
No,
I think
they beat the Ravens in Baltimore. They ran all over the Ravens. That game was awfully
yeah,
impressive. So yeah, I didn't want
I
that
was
to be
gonna
a
I was gonna
knock on the Lions. I mean, that's really why I'm kind of not hesitant to move them up. But like if they would have maybe lost by one score to the Chiefs, I know that game was kind of close throughout. Um, but if they would have really hung in there a little more, maybe. But yeah, it's just against some of these bigger teams, they just haven't necessarily been as consistent. So I think at Philly will be a big telling game.
it'll be a telling game for sure, and it could warrant the Lions moving up in these conversations and the Eagles moving down. But I then have the Lions behind the Eagles and Rams, so that would put them at 6. And then for 7, 8, 9, 10, I went with the Chargers, the Bills, the Chiefs, and then the Buccaneers. And to be honest, I really did consider putting the Chiefs all the way up at 6 over the Lions, over the Chargers, over the Bills. I think that collection of teams right there is very interchangeable. I have a little bit more confidence in the Chargers than I do the Bills, frankly. They're playing with both tackles out once again because Justin Herbert just can't seem to, have consistent, healthy offensive line play to protect him. Almost feels like West Coast Joe Burrow in terms of that situation. But despite that, the Chargers have a ton of weapons. They've been able to run the ball despite Amarian Hampton being out and Najee Harris being out. So Kamani Vidal has taken over the running back room. He's performed very well, and to be honest, I mean, they've just they're floating around. I mean, they're 7-3. It's definitely better than what we've seen out of the Chargers in a couple of the last few years. They're better in close games as well. Jim Harbaugh is a good coach. I think a lot of those Michigan players who aren't even performing as well in the NFL, I think we can sit here and honestly make the case that a lot of that was Jim Harbaugh. He is a very good football coach, and even back to his days in San Francisco, he knows what he's doing. And I think the Chargers will definitely potentially win a game in the playoffs. We'll have to see what the matchups are, but say they play Pittsburgh, I like them to beat Pittsburgh. So, for example, the Bills, again, a little bit more suspect. They seem a little bit more like Lions esque for me in terms of the performance against the good teams and then beating up on the bad teams. And now they've had that loss against the Dolphins. How do they respond? Do they have a potential ripple effect that we mentioned with the Colts? And then Kansas City, I think they're solidified. I do have them a little bit lower because they are 5-4, and they do have some losses against teams that are ahead of them in my rankings. But overall, they look like one of the better teams in the league despite the record. And then the Buccaneers, the injuries they've had, I think they've earned being here more than Denver has. I think Denver would be my first team on the outside looking in, alongside a few other teams. But there's truly a group of teams that have kind of separated themselves from the field. And I think those teams are probably the first 5 I mentioned, and then the next 5. And then after that, it's really, we'll see. I mean, I think we're probably disrespecting the Broncos, but at the same time, I think they haven't done enough to earn the respect. They lost. They won a couple games they definitely should have lost. I'll put it like that. And they just, sometimes that happens in football. Miraculous things happen, and you win. And they almost fell into a trap game against the Raiders. So that's my power rankings. Those are your power rankings. We'll also, as I transition into closing out the episode, we will probably more than likely, I plan on doing this, make a graphic for these power rankings. We'll post it when we post all of the episode clips as well. So stay tuned for that. Later this week, we will be switching over from the football side of things and going to the basketball side of things because we are going to talk college basketball. We're going to talk NBA. There was a pretty cataclysmic firing today in the NBA that we are going to hold off on. We're going to talk about it on Thursday alongside some other things. But other than that, stay tuned for all those things. As always, we'll do our locks of the week. My record has not been on the graphics because it is not good, nor will I share my record. But it was another upsetting week for the locks of the week. They're just fades for me at this point. Other than that, we want to thank everybody for once again listening to Beyond the Box Score. I believe this is episode 10, so it's moving quickly. Things are rolling, and we
Mm-hmm.
expect to continue to pump content. But outside of that, as always, have a good, safe weekend. Enjoy sports, family. Thanksgiving around the corner, so have spend some time with your loved ones. But since we're also recording it on this specific day, Happy Veterans Day as well. I want to take a quick moment to mention all the veterans out there. We wouldn't be where we are right now without them. So a big shout out to them as well. We thank you for everything you guys do. Other than that, we are tuning out. Thank you guys for listening. Like, subscribe, comment, share, whatever it is you do on the various platforms you're listening to this on. Please do it. We will love the support. Other than that, thank you guys and have a good one.